Erin Molan. A warm welcome to Jonny Gould's Jewish State.
Jonny, it is so lovely to, well, both be with you and your Jewish state. Thank you for having me. It's a real privilege.
You speak with such eloquence, economy of words, conviction, and moral clarity, and you have backed Israel to the hilt. Why have you done this?
It's a great question. I'll make it very clear, first of all, to the handful of those who like to think otherwise, not being paid a cent by anyone for my views or opinions. I'm really quite passionate about protecting that part of my voice in terms of anything that I do in this space. So that can just be shut down entirely. Uh, I was raised to speak up for what is right, even when it is difficult. And that was from a very young age, and not in that really punishing kind of, school president, school counselor kind of way. I wasn't, God bless them all, but it was more if someone was being treated in a way that didn't feel right as a young person, it's sometimes hard to stand up for them, but I always would. And I think a big part of that, like most people, would come from how I was raised. My dad is my mum is the most impressive in our family times a million. But dad, from a professional perspective, was just incredible. He was a major general in the army when he retired. He entered the Senate, became Australia's most individually voted for politician in history, which is no mean feat. And he had a moral compass that I can only aspire to have. He was the most incredible man, full of integrity, always did what was right, regardless of the cost, always followed the rules, always stuck to the law, because he used to say to us, and I remember when he was in Iraq for a year, and when he came home, us kids, we were teenagers, we'd say, how do you, why do you have to follow the rules when the enemy, the Al Qaeda or ISIS don't? That's such an unfair playing field, blah, 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 blah. And he would always say to us, well, if we don't, what are we fighting for? What are we fighting to protect if we lower ourselves to their levels? So he was someone that was staunch in his beliefs and support, and he treated people just so brilliantly. I think one of the things that stood out once he died, and we lost him last year to prostate cancer, in Parliament, friends and foes alike, the opposition, people who wouldn't have agreed with him in terms of his stance on many political issues, would talk about how kind he was, his big smile. When I'd go to Parliament House, the cleaners would be the first to come up to me and say, no one has treated us with in a nicer, more genuine way than your father. He spoke to us the same way he'd speak to the Prime Minister. He was just an incredible human being. And a lot of what I try and do in my life is based on what I watched him do, not even what he told me to do or lessons he taught me, but the way he lived his life. And even, in politics, there'd be times where I'd be thinking, Dad, just bloody say this because it'll be easier, and then old mate will like you more, and you might get more opportunities here, and you might get this portfolio and blah, blah, blah. Even I'd sometimes be like, come on, Dad. And he'd be like, no, no. What I believe and what I think in here is what I will always say and what I will always do. And yeah, he was incredible. So I think whilst it's been challenging, it would have been far more challenging for me not to speak up in defense of a nation who is under attack, not just from an enemy that targets it, but an enemy that targets the entire world, all of us who believe in the things that Israel believes in. And that doesn't mean Israel is perfect. It doesn't mean that every decision that they've made, and I'm not privy to those processes, I'm not saying that every decision they've made will have been the right one, but I will defend till the cows come home their right to defend themselves and eradicate an evil terrorist organization that is a threat to all of us.
Indeed, what a great introduction. Thank you, Erin. Your courage has created a whole new path in your life, hasn't it? In the sense that when you say something, when you take a position, and you have done, that was your job at Sky News Australia, not just on Israel, but on a lot of things. It was a path. This is what Erin Molan is about. But when you talk about Israel, your path is completely deviated. Julie Burchill described her friendships as a revolving door. Is it the same for you, given your quotes moral clarity as described by the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, no less, during your visit to Israel? Have you had a complete reset of all your friendships? Have you lost and gained friends in multiple numbers?
It's another great question, and I haven't been asked that as yet. That was incredible, first of all, to meet with the president and to sit there and have both he and his amazing wife quote my own words back to me is, that they're the times that I miss Dad and I wish I could say, Dad, look at this, it's funny. I don't miss Dad when hard things happen, really. I miss Dad when amazing things happen because I want to share that with him. So look, that was really special. In terms of my personal situation, look, absolutely, there are people who don't agree with my stance, absolutely. And I put them into two categories. I put those who are agenda driven, who understand right from wrong. I don't want anything to do with them. If I genuinely believe they understand, but they are agenda driven, then good riddance. Then there are people who I feel are just completely unable to grasp the reality of it because of so much noise. And I look at people in that category, there's no malice. And I know a lot of these people really well. My belief is that I think about a single mum, 3 kids, lives out in Western Sydney. She only gets tiny news bites, right? I'm in the car the other day listening to the ABC, and because I like to remain balanced, so I listen to all different voices, even if I disagree with majority of what they say. And the start of a bulletin into the Middle East situation went exactly like this. Day 400 and something of Israel's illegal invasion of Gaza. And and it drives me absolutely spare because it is completely untrue. It is so misleading and it is dangerous. It is a false narrative. It is so dangerous. But I'm thinking about Betsy with 3 kids, busy, cost of living crisis, can't afford to pay her rent. She hears that little bit, gets out of the car. She might give it 3 seconds. God, that's awful what they're doing to those poor innocent kids in Gaza. Then she goes on with her day because she doesn't have the luxury of investigating or looking into it further or checking sources, et cetera, et cetera. So she cares about people. She cares about humanity. She cares about kids. So do I. The most powerful responses I get to my work are from people who I think are like her, who say, Erin, I've just watched one of your pieces and the values and morals that I hold have not changed in the slightest, but the side I now realize they align with has. And I think that's the battle that we have. I think there are useful idiots. There are people that are malicious. There are people with agendas. And they're in their own category, the agenda-driven people who are fully aware of what they're doing, whatever. The people that you can not convince, because you don't need to convince, you just need to open their eyes to the reality of the situation, that if you care about awful images of kids struggling in Gaza, then you must condemn Hamas and support the only country that is trying to eradicate the evil terrorists who are responsible wholly for their suffering. And I think that's what I feel like my voice is trying to do. And that's what I feel incredibly passionate about, because I care just as much about them as I do about any child in the world.
Erin, in the first few minutes of our discussion, it's clear to see why you made such swift progress on Sky News Australia. You hosted your own show titled Erin every Friday evening. You joined Sky News in January 2022, just 3 years ago, but your time at Sky News came to an abrupt end. The official reason cited budgetary constraints rather than political views. However, there was significant speculation and controversy surrounding your exit, with some suggesting your support for Israel played a role. You're trying to play that down beyond the months of crisis. Now, Erin, what is the story? Was it they ran out of money, or was it that you were too salty for Sky News Australia?
Look, I can't ever speak on behalf of them, but what I would say regarding the support of Israel is that there are a lot of hosts on that network who are very strong and staunch in their support. So I can't see, and believe you me, I would be incredibly honest. I'm an honest person. It doesn't mean that I would keep some things personal that I feel are private, of course, but from that perspective, I am very confident that it had nothing to do with my support for Israel, but I don't know. Budget. I was on a fairly good wicket doing a show a week, a show that I think did really well and that resonated. They made a decision. That's their decision. I now realize that it will be one of the greatest gifts anyone could have ever given me, because it's now opened up this whole new world for me that will hopefully enable me to reach an even larger audience. And when I look back at that, that was my first kind of foray into this world. So I was a sports host for 20 years in Australian television. I was the first woman to host rugby league, to host a footy show, to do different things in that space. But my passion was always politics, foreign affairs, national security, a lot because of dad, but I also grew up in Indonesia. And so I was there in 1998 when the Suharto regime fell. And that really, as a 16-year-old, to watch a country stand up and fight for democracy, to watch the Trisakti University shootings, to watch this dictator essentially, and look, there's debate as to whether or not he was, but I think it's fairly obvious that he did not lead in the best interest of his people. To watch him fall and a people rise up, and no, they're not perfect yet by any stretch of the imagination, but that really opened my eyes to what mattered in the world and why what we have in Australia is so important and so valuable. So it's interesting. I once spoke in an interview about watching a state election in Australia rather than one of the biggest football games. And one of the bosses at Sky saw that and thought, maybe you're more suited to come over to us. And so they poached me, I guess is how you would put it. And look, I'm very grateful for the platform that I had there, incredibly grateful for the opportunity. But I've realized very quickly that they were essentially a studio for me. Everything I say and do, I write. Every monologue I do, every editorial, it's all me. I write it all, I do it all. So to be honest, thank them for the opportunity, but I am so excited about what's to come.
Universal values, whatever the platform you're broadcasting on. And as you mentioned, you transitioned from rugby league and Aussie rules, we call it over here, Aussie rules football. I started in sport as well. After three
Oh,
decades,
did you?
I
All
did.
the best do, Jonny. All the
That's
best
it.
do.
Well, we do 90 minutes of warfare, and then we report on it, and then we come back
Can I
and do
tell you,
another.
I did, as I got to my mid to late 30s, I did start to think, do I really want to be talking about old mate's groin at 11 p.m. on a Friday night? Do I
It's
really? Does
true.
this fulfill me?
It's true. I mean, I started in that industry. I was there for 3 decades. I moved on to Israel and Jewish stories because it seemed so very challenging, the world's most intractable subject. And obviously, being of a Jewish background, it was fascinating to me. I didn't really have a plan for it, and I started doing interviews in this space in December 2018, and I've never really looked back.
Oh, wow.
But what's not funny about this, and you talk in such a triumphant way, in such a strong way, and that how everything represents an opportunity is the death threats that follow
Mm.
you, and they are to be taken seriously. You hear about death threats in football and all this kind of nonsense, and it's just stupid fans saying very, very bad things. But this is not the same. We
You've just absolutely nailed something that I hadn't quite articulated myself. And that's rare because I'm good at articulating stuff. I've got to say, I just before this conversation, I was on the phone to my daughter's father, and we're separated, but he's an amazing dad. We co-parent beautifully. We're really close. And he just kind of said to me, as he does, quite, is there any kind of security update? Are you like and it just, and then I get this sick feeling, and I'm saying to him, oh, look, absolutely, and it's the one thing that scares the hell out of me. And you're right, when I was working in sport, I would get death threats as well. In fact, I was the instigator of the Online Safety Act, which is laws in Australia that help protect people online. Scott Morrison, our former Prime Minister, called it Erin's Law because I was getting death threats because I dared as a woman to sit in a football panel. But you've just nailed what I was trying to understand myself, the difference in that they were idiotic football fans, or not even fans, just misogynistic pigs who were, you belong in the kitchen, die, that were unsettling, but never for a second did I really think in most cases that anyone would follow through, because they just don't. This space is so different. And that I'll be honest with you, that terrifies me. And it's something I don't take lightly, or I'm not dismissive of. I'm doing things all the time to try and ensure that, much more so than me, that my daughter is safe, because I choose to do this. And she is the reason, for the most part, I choose to do this, but she hasn't made a choice in this space. And when she's brought into threats and awful things, it is really difficult. And I question it all the time. I'm constantly reviewing, is this worth it? Is what I'm doing now worth it? And the conclusion I still come to now is that yes, it is, because if more people were doing it, then maybe I could afford to step back a little bit and say, when she's older, I'll join the fight. There's just not enough people in an effective way speaking up for what is right. And I worry, I look around the world, I look at America, I look at Europe, I look at the UK, holy hell, I look at the UK and I think, sure, I might not get as many death threats now and not have to worry as much about her immediate safety now, but what the hell is the world going to look like in 2 years, in 6 months? If I don't fight on behalf of her for the type of world that she deserves and every kid in this world deserves. So yeah, it's I'm not going to lie, it's really hard. And I've had plenty of threats that police have looked into, and there are ones that are coming from sources that have some pretty significant history in this space in terms of having carried out things that are awful and violent prior. It's really scary. But what's scarier to me is the trajectory that we're heading toward at the moment when it comes to particularly life in the West. And that is under threat. You cannot, life everywhere is under threat from people who don't see death and destruction and torture as an evil thing. They see it as an honor, almost as something that fulfills a legacy. And that terrifies me still more than the kind of threats that I'm getting at the moment.
Do you think there is a complacency in the West, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in France and Belgium, the United States and Canada, about the state, about the threat to the West from not just the Islamists, but the useful idiots and those really nasty people behind the useful idiots who really believe in this hatred of their own kith and kin?
Oh, absolutely, without any doubt. And look, I speak with more knowledge about Australia than anywhere else, but we have no idea we are alive here. And there's a reason why it's easy to not care and to not speak up. When I went to Israel a couple of weeks ago, I went down to all of the sites up north to the border, down south, Nova Music Festival site, all the kibbutz down there, and you were hearing bombs going off. You were hearing gunfire. You are hearing sirens. In Israel, they are under threat every single second of every single day. So it's not a choice for them to fight against this, right? They have to survive. In Australia, we feel so far away from it that we feel like not only do we not have to speak, but we can allow others to speak to the detriment of all of us because we don't feel enough affected by it. We don't feel that imminent threat yet. But as we start to see, we've had terrorist attacks, of course, in Australia. Everyone around the world has. But I said this after New Orleans, it feels like there's a shift, and it's not just coming from people who are outside coming in. The indoctrination, which I know has existed prior, but it's on another level now because people almost feel, they don't feel anymore like it's this sneaky little thing. They're seeing publicly people that they may have respected when they were or looked up to, or these feminists who are essentially advocating on behalf of terrorists who rape and kill people. And they're going, gosh, maybe this little feeling I had, or this little, maybe it's right. I am on the right side. Great. I'm empowered. I'm emboldened. The threat is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger with every second that goes by. And I feel like we are so asleep to it at the moment. And it's not just even, Islamic extremism. In Australia, China, they're not even hiding their intention when it comes to retaking Taiwan with the dominance that they want. We are very close to China in a geopolitical sense, and we have zero ability to defend ourselves against basically anything. You look at the US, yeah, they're an ally of ours, but, Donald Trump, and rightly so, thinks that everyone should pull their own weight. And if you want us to help you, you've got to help us. And when the US asked us for a ship to help with the Houthis, we said no. So I feel like in Australia particularly, we have no idea how intense the threat is and how immediate the threat is and how close the threat is. And I feel like the rest of the West, they're waking up now a little bit. I feel like with each of these instances that get closer to home, people wake up a little more and it doesn't feel as distant. But whether or not that will jolt them into speaking up or standing for what they believe in, because that's the point I make. The silent majority, there are times in the world where you can be part of the silent majority and that's okay because you're not required to speak up. Now you are required absolutely to speak up because what's at stake is the freedom and life of all of us and our kids. So the silent majority no longer have the privilege of being silent.
And Douglas Murray said to me how the silent majority are silent. Why? Why are you silent? speak up, speak up about it. And the conversation went into places where people thought, well, I have no particular power, but that doesn't mean to say that at any particular level you can't speak out. You must do. So, for example, around the kitchen at work,
Absolutely.
the drinks fountain,
You've got
etc.
teenagers at uni, they
Yeah,
might tell you to
exactly.
F off,
Yeah.
but try. And it's, and that whole I don't have a voice. You can create a voice. The beauty of the world today. Look at me. I've lost every bloody job I had at the start of the year. Big jobs on big networks. I've now got no job. And yes, I know I had a pretty good profile pre-existing, but there are enough platforms where your voice, if you are passionate enough and you are persistent enough, you can find an audience for it. So use it, use your voice. And it's not controversial. This is the thing that drives me spare. People will say to me sometimes, oh, you must be a little bit worried about the backlash because what you're saying is controversial. Are you kidding me? I am calling out terrorists who kill and rape. Point out what I've said ever that is controversial. Ever. If what I stand for is controversial, then God help all of us. That is terrifying. And the other thing as well, this whole people are very worried because when it comes to Islam, they're worried about speaking out. I grew up in Indonesia. I speak the language fluently. Besok pagi saya akan pergi ke toko dan mungkin sesudah itu akan minum susu. I speak the language of the world's largest Islamic population fluently. I love the people. I go all the time. They're like family to me. My second mother, Sumi, she's a devout Muslim Indonesian. I fight for them. My fight against terrorism is for them. Islamic extremism hurts their own people as much as it hurts anyone else. So don't be afraid of being called something or being accused of something, because what you're actually doing is helping people of the Islamic faith, the vast majority who are peace-loving people. You're standing up for them as well. Don't let bullies or people try to scare you off from speaking by accusing you of things that are utterly ridiculous. Anyone who defends terrorism is hurting everyone in the world. Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, the entire population of the world is being hurt by this, not one particular group.
Indeed, I've just returned from Morocco where I was able to study at first hand the relationship between Muslims and Jews, between Arabs and Berbers. And the reason why Morocco is so successful as a Muslim nation is that they put the essence of Moroccanness ahead of Islam. They
Yeah.
enjoy the Berbers and the Arabs and the Jews. They call them the three peoples of Morocco as Moroccans first. And it's a consensus that, God willing, has lasted, what, 13 centuries, and maybe
Is that
it
amazing?
will last longer. That's why the Jews who've left Morocco talk about the old country in such
Yeah.
glowing terms in a way that perhaps Jews from other Muslim countries just don't or cannot from their own history.
No. I'll tell you this one image that stayed with me from Israel. We went to the Western Wall, and obviously the Al-Aqsa Mosque there, which is, beautiful, and all these incredible religious institutions. And we walked past the mosque, and outside there was two IDF soldiers. One had just walked back, no shoes on. He was a Muslim man. He just prayed, and he was walking back to his mate who was wearing the kippah. So obviously a Jewish IDF soldier who was holding his boots for him as he went in to pray, holding his gun in one hand, his boots in the other. Old mate comes back out having prayed. The Jewish soldier hands him his boots. He leans on him while he puts his boots on. Then they both just walk off. One Islamic, one Jewish, both IDF soldiers, both with guns. One holding on to the Islamic man, holding onto the shoulder of the Jewish man to put his boots back on that the Jewish man was holding whilst he prayed in the mosque. I mean, that is Israel. Like, that image, I just can't stop thinking about. And I just, this whole apartheid state, this whole the things that get slung the way of Israel. And I make this point, I'm very, conscious of this as well. And I've said this publicly many times. Israel is not perfect. No country is. There will be decisions once they are reviewed where people will say that was not the right thing, or that wasn't the right choice. Absolutely. That happens in any conflict, regardless of whether you are in the right or in the wrong in terms of fighting that war. So I acknowledge that will be the case, absolutely, like it is with any war in all of history. But I will defend Israel's right to defend itself always. And they are the good in this battle. Not every individual within them will be good, but they are the good. The terrorists are the bad.
Should we talk about the Pope now? Because
Oh, please. As a good Catholic girl, I was hoping you'd ask.
Well, it's so interesting because a number of prominent Catholic voices have appeared recently on Johnny Gould's Jewish State as a clarion call, because obviously it is some of the Catholic world that has come out against Israel in the most visceral form. We think of Ireland, we think of Spain. So Brendan O'Neill is someone who I know that has made an impact in Australia. Congressman Joe Walsh, I've spoken to as well, who's also a prominent thinker on Israel, who told me that he wanted to retire and die in Israel one day. That was as strong as he really believed.
Wow.
But Pope Francis, you challenged the Pope's comments respectfully, but directly, where he seemed to place the responsibility for the civilian casualties in Gaza solely on Israel. And you urged the Pope to use his influence instead to help end the war, secure the release of the hostages held by Hamas, and condemn terrorism explicitly. There was that awful photo. It looked like a plant where he's in a wheelchair, and there's a picture of Jesus the baby with a Palestinian kafir on. That's a visual libel.
That was probably one of the hardest pieces I've done, I think. And it, generally when I was on Sky, I would collect kind of snippets all week of what I would use for my kind of editorial. So if I heard a news bulletin like that ABC one I said to you, I would write it down and then call it out. And same as with anything else that I see, news, things that have happened at the UN, the whole thing. And usually I write it on that morning, then it's on my show that day. So it's not like I stew over scripts. It's a fairly immediate, I write fairly fluently and then it's done and gone. The Pope one was kind of 5 days of me thinking, no, I do want to go to heaven. Like that, I think would be nice. Not sure. I mean, is my faith complete? I don't know. But I was originally really worried, and not just in terms of doing it, because once I've made up my mind to do it, the way in which I did it. So the first kind of thing that I did was similar to, when I might call out the UN or the ICC, which is a little bit cheeky in ways. And I actually ripped that up in a computer sense and thought the best way to do this is with so much respect because he's the Pope. But then I was thinking, well, those humans on earth who have been part of the Catholic Church haven't always been incredible people. So I don't think it's a reflection on God if I am to potentially reach out to one of, the highest ranking Catholics in the nation. But when I looked really deeply into it, I just felt it was so deeply flawed. And I felt as a Catholic, and the amount of feedback I got from other Catholics was phenomenal in terms of, I can't think of maybe one person sent something mean to me and saying like, you don't even go to church. It's like, well, I said that. God would know that, by the way, already. So thanks, Scoop. But to be honest, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive in terms of what I did. And I felt like it needed to be said because I'm Catholic and I don't feel like he speaks on my behalf. And I wanted to make that very well known. And plus, I think the potential for him to use his voice for good is, I've got a little brother who's gay and he's been with his partner for 15 years. And I remember him saying to me years and years ago, and this is one of the reasons I kind of stopped going to church a little bit, is because I felt like any institution that made him feel less than equal, I didn't want to support. And he's the most incredible human being you'll ever find, the most loving, the smartest. He's a pilot. He's awesome. And I remember talking to him about it one day because I was engaged to get married and I'd said to him, I'm not getting married in a church because they still make you feel like you are less. And he said to me, they could have been, because he has all the values that other Catholics have. He is such a genuinely decent person. He said they could have been such a force for good for me and people like me. They could have, yes, traditions and historically, etc. But once people understood more, he said they could have just been a force for good. And I feel like that stayed with me so strongly and it resonated in this situation as well. I thought, imagine if the Pope and the Catholic Church had come out and been a force for good in this conflict, the war would be over. If enough pressure was initially put on Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the war would be over. There would be no casualties for anyone to determine whose fault it is that they exist. But because the world was so morally bankrupt and people were so flawed in their response, they have enabled this to go on this long. That is why pressure on Israel, hello, you wouldn't need to put pressure on Israel in terms of how it conducts its rescue operations or its elimination of terrorist threats. if you had pressured the terrorists to return the hostages and lay down their arms. It just makes way too much sense to me. So, look, someone reached out who is very close with the Pope and has told me that they are going to put this to him when they meet with him in about a week or so. They've translated it. So that will be very interesting. I haven't said that to anyone yet, but I'll wait and see whether or not he wants to meet with me after that. But hopefully he might see it. And I mean, probably not, but who knows? We'll wait and see.
Next stop, Rome for Erin Molan. That would be. Uh,
How do you think I'd be
uh,
received there?
I think you would be received with great respect and deference should you get that far. I think it's a decision whether he
I'd
wants
have
to.
to
Whether he
I'd
wants
have
to
to
do
look at
that.
which countries I'd have to travel through because I've also been banned by Russia.
Have you?
Vladimir Putin is not my biggest fan because I called him out for being a war criminal and and an evil warlord, which he didn't take too kindly to. So I'm on a banned list there. So I'd have to figure out a route in.
Yeah, you won't have to fly via Moscow, I assure you. And listen, so
Geography is not my strong point, clearly.
don't worry about it. But what you did was you went to the heart of your very identity, and again, you didn't have to do that. But you did do it.
Mm.
So the pushback in your own family, are they proud of you, or have you received some resistance? This is not just about your friends that you win and lose. This is about the uncle and aunt that you're going to see at Christmas, etc. You know, how's the family?
Yeah. Look, they are incredible. And it's interesting because I don't really bring this up at all, right? They all know what I do, but even at Christmas at mum's. But
It's
I've
the
got to
elephant in the
say,
room, Erin.
isn't it funny though? Because I mean, obviously, mum is amazing. And look, if I said to mum, look, I'm gonna join a real estate agency and do rentals that will provide me with a secure, fairly safe, non-controversial existence, or I'm going to keep doing this, she'd be like, option real estate, please. Yes, every day of the week. Because mum was always averse to risk, whereas dad was the complete opposite. But something that was really lovely, actually. And look, they're all incredible. They are genuinely decent people who, and it's interesting because we're not like right-wing nut jobs at all. Like I'm fairly conservative when it comes to the economy, national security, defense, but I'm progressive socially. As I said, my brother's gay, and my dad, he was a Liberal Party conservative senator, staunch Catholic, traditional, the whole thing. He voted yes in same-sex marriage. I think it's hard to put people in a certain box, but there was this photo that was sent to me out of Gaza, and there was a big spray painting. I've got to find it. I haven't looked at it in a little while, on a building that said something to the effect of, Erin Molan is a hero, or it was something just incredible. And I put it in our family group chat, even though I don't put much in the family group chat. I send mum a lot, but not as much of this stuff. And just all the kids kind of came back and just said how proud dad would be and how I'm continuing his legacy. And so I think, no one's ever said to me, and look, we're a fairly honest, open family. I think any lack of engagement from them on this would just be they have their own lives and they're busy. But for the most part, I feel incredibly supported, and I feel very, very lucky about that. But I'd also be very comfortable if I wasn't, because I believe so strongly in this. And even when people will, there'll be the odd comment, oh, you're pro-genocide, you love kids, people who clearly haven't watched any of my stuff. It would have bothered me 5 years ago, the thought of other people thinking that was who I am. But I am now so self-assured in what I believe and who I am and what I stand for, and that I am on the right side of history. There is no doubt in my mind. And it's not from being in an echo chamber. As I said to you, I watch, listen, read everything, not just people who agree with me, everything, to make sure that I am not in that echo chamber. And I am so confident in what I stand for that it wouldn't bother me anyway. It would disappoint me maybe a little bit, but it would not change my course in the slightest.
No, it's so great to hear. And Erin, one of the attractions of having you on the show is that you bust the echo chamber. That's the whole purpose of Jonny Gould's Jewish State. The catchphrase
Yeah.
for us is for those who listen, for those who are willing to listen.
Yes, and
It's
that's exactly right. There's no point me preaching to the converted, right?
yeah,
Like that's kind of, people in your community, I suspect most would agree with me on most things. But what I love being able to do is go beyond that. And
Yeah,
that's where I think, I'm having a lot of success, and I'll continue that fight because it matters too much not to.
absolutely. So a lot of people who've had very big media careers have gone off and said, I know, I'm going to set up on X. Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan's on YouTube. What next for Erin Molan? So many big names setting up on their own shows. Is that your next step, or are you waiting for the call from Fox News in the US? What's going on, Erin?
Well, look, the thing that concerns me about waiting for the call from Fox News is they own Sky News Australia. So
Well,
I
yes,
suspect if they
yes.
deeply cared, then I would still be there.
Well,
So
yes.
look, I'm not waiting for that call, but I've got to tell you, I've had multiple TV offers that have just been incredible. And I've also had incredible conversations on platforms that you've mentioned, and ongoing conversations. So I think, look, my ideal would be a mix where I can control my own content and what I do, but also I'd still like to keep a little bit, I think, in that mainstream media, do one show a week, just like I was doing on Sky, that covers the world, global affairs, the kind of stuff that I'm really passionate about. But I think, what I learned this year, particularly, I've never been sacked before. And this year, basically every job I started the year with, I no longer have. And I think for me, I don't ever want to be in that position where I'm reliant upon other people for how I make a living, or for, other people and their determination of my worth to an organization does not determine my worth. I've learnt that very quickly. And it's actually, I keep thinking after this year, I should be in the corner in the fetal position with zero self-confidence and no belief. But I'm the complete opposite for some stupid, bizarre, bat beat, crazy reason. I've never had more belief in how incredible I am in the right space. Like, I'm shithouse at so many things. I can't cook, like, a million things I'm so bad at. But for some reason, my belief in my ability to articulate how people feel and to deliver that with emotion and to tap into something special, I've never had more belief in. So I'm excited. I'm excited about what's next. I've got a YouTube channel. I think I started with 400 subscribers. Watch out, Piers. So that's fun. I'm just putting little clips up, and X is something where I probably have the biggest audience at the moment, and I've had a couple of very good meetings there. So we'll wait and see. It'll be interesting because I've been scathing of, as it was, Twitter in the past in terms of, the Online Safety Act. So it'd be quite a strange turn of events if I ended up doing something more official with them. We'll see.
Indeed, it would. And X is extremely powerful. It does deliver my biggest audience, and it
Yeah.
wasn't intending to. But since Elon Musk expanded it beyond 2 minutes and 20 seconds to for as
Yes.
long as you want, it has made a huge amount of difference to the awareness and the programs that I make.
Yeah. Should we do a little suck up to Elon segment now or later?
Yeah,
He's
well, I think we kind of just done it, haven't we? Um, um,
very much so.
and now that you've traveled the world and seen so many different people, what hope do you have for the world now? Is it optimistic or is it pessimistic? Where are you, Erin, after your travels around the world?
I'm thinking because I want to give this answer the respect it deserves, because it's a complex question. I am definitely overall optimistic. Absolutely. Trump has a big part to do with that. And I will say this. Do I agree with everything he's said and done in the past? No. Do I think he is the best person right now to lead this world? Absolutely, every day of the week, in terms of that US election and the choices that we had. He gives me hope in the ways that actually matter, not in rhetoric, not in, oh, he speaks so statesman-like. I couldn't care less. I don't care about that. I want kids to stop dying in the Middle East. I want terrorists to stop. I want Iran to stop getting money to fund the horrific things that they do. I want China to understand that if they invade Taiwan, and it won't end with Taiwan, it's just like, Iran with Israel, doesn't end there. They want the world. I want someone in power who is strong enough to deter all of those things. So that gives me immense hope. I think there's a shift. I've felt the shift, particularly since Trump won. I feel like there's been a shift. I feel like even cancel culture, I feel like that's almost people are sick to death of it. I really do get that feeling. So I'm optimistic. I just think young people scare me. Um, they scare me in terms of how, and I'm sure it's been the same all through history in terms of just how easily they're able to be manipulated into believing something, because I believe most people are inherently good in the world. So the fact that young people can you know dress up and hold Hamas flags and think somehow that they are on the good side, that scares me. But there's also enough young people who are refuting that. And we're starting to see them have more courage now, particularly in universities, coming out and speaking to the opposite of that. That gives me a bit of hope, but definitely overall optimistic. My dad used to say, I'm cautiously optimistic. Dad used to also make me feel completely paranoid about everything and anything. He would always say, like, if I got a big job or when I got the job on the footy show, I'd call him and say, Dad, I just got this job on the footy show. This is amazing. He'd be like, that's amazing. Now you will have a car accident on the way home. So be hyper vigilant. And he would say to me, like, whenever anything good happens, something really bad's going to happen.
Yes.
And yet, if you're in Iraq fighting the infidel, I get it. That's something you need to adopt. But me in civilian life in Australia probably didn't need to take on that level of fear and paranoia, which I did. So thanks, Dad. But he said cautiously optimistic always with anything. So that's the answer I'll leave you with.
That's excellent. And you know, at a Jewish wedding, the groom breaks a glass underneath his shoe, just to remind us all that you can celebrate all you want, but the temple has been destroyed. That we haven't quite finished our journey. So it's this
I
idea.
love that.
It is a sort of cautious optimism that the
Yes.
world needs repairing still, the
Doesn't it
hope of
just?
not yet. You are
Doesn't it?
a practitioner of critical thinking. You're a credit to society, to the world. It is a real privilege to speak to you, Erin. You've given me, and I hope the audience, a real strength as we enter this new year. Thank you very much, Erin Molan, for joining us here on Johnny Gould's Jewish State.
Thank you so much. I'm getting a bit emotional because I remember Dad got an award, Thinker of the Year award, and we
All
would
right.
all take the piss out of him for it, including him, because he was such an incredible thinker and he wrote books, Danger on Our Doorstep about the rising threat of China, Running the War in Iraq about Iraq, and just to hear someone of your caliber say that about me, he would be immensely proud. And I thank you so much. I'm not often outwardly emotional, but yeah, it means so much. And I feel like he's as close to me as he has been since he passed away, which is a lovely feeling as well. So thank you.
Oh, Erin, that's wonderful. Thank you very much.
And
I'm
thank
on the
you for
school
all the
run.
incredible work that you do as well in this
Oh,
space. It's amazing.
thank you very much.